Welcome everyone. My name is Greg Alexander, and I am the CEO of SBI, a sales and marketing consulting firm committed to helping you make your number. You are watching SBI TV. This is a monthly web TV show featuring guests just like you, executives trying to grow their revenues. By tuning in each month, you can peek behind the scenes and watch your peers discuss their strategies for making their numbers. On today's show, we have a very unique guest. Tony Capucille is the Chief Sales Officer of Heartland Payment Systems, and Tony is responsible for the sales organization's strategy and development. He reports directly to the Chief Executive Officer, and Tony fosters close working relationships with internal and external stakeholders to ensure the sales organization's efficient operation and success. Heartland Payment Systems is a Fortune 1000 company and one of the largest payment processors in the United States, which does $2.3 billion in annual sales and employs almost 4,000 employees, 1,300 of which are salespeople. I described today's guest as unique. So what makes Tony unique? Well, at age 35, Tony is the youngest chief sales officer inside the Fortune 1000. The reason I asked Tony to be on the show is to discuss the 7 dominant sales organizational models. Are you wondering if you should go with a hunter-farmer model? Or perhaps maybe you want to specialize on vertical industry? Or maybe roll out a new product overlay team? Is the geographic proximity of a sales rep to an account still relevant? These are all great questions, and we will answer these and more during today's show. So let's welcome Tony to the show.
Hey, Greg.
Nice to see you, Tony.
Thanks for having me.
It's my pleasure. Have a seat. Okay. So today we're going to talk about organizational models.
Yep.
Okay. So our experience is we've done about 100 sales organizational design engagements over the last few years. And we've seen 7 dominant org models that are used by maybe 90% of the B2B sales organizations in the world. None of which is perfect.
Right, sure.
There's no such thing as a perfect org model.
Completely agree.
What might be right for you might be wrong for me. What's right for you today might be wrong for you tomorrow. So I thought we would go through each of these and kind of have a pros and cons review.
Yeah, that's good.
And get your perspective on it, okay? All right, so the first org model is what we call stratification. And this is defined simply as assigning sales teams based on size of market. So typically, you kind of have a pyramid. At the very top of the pyramid, you have your biggest accounts, and they're called on usually by your most capable salespeople. In the middle is kind of your bread and butter, mid-size accounts that's called on usually by the largest percentage of the population of the sales force. And at the bottom is kind of lots of smaller accounts that might be large in number, but might spend just a small amount of money, each month with you. And that's usually called on by some type of inside sales channel or some virtual channel.
Right.
All right, so let me review the pros. Okay, so in that model, what we typically see is that sales expense is proportional to contribution margin, so that's a plus. Each segment receives a focus, so everyone's clear as to what it is they're supposed to do. And you can put the best reps on the accounts with the most potential. So those are in the plus category.
Sure.
And the negative category is that industry knowledge may suffer because you're industry agnostic in this case. There's a large geographic dispersion, okay? So proximity could possibly be a problem. And market trends can throw your org model, into chaos. I mean, if a small company becomes a big company pretty quickly, those types of things can be problematic. So what is your opinion on the stratification model?
Yeah, and I'm going to go back to the first point you made about it shifts and it changes. It's not always going to be the same. That's one thing we've definitely seen. The stratification model is really interesting, and when you get to put a top sales rep on an upper end account that's most profitable, as you mentioned earlier, it's a huge benefit. That being said, what I've found so often with the changes in the marketplace and the fast, rapid growth, that challenge actually oftentimes overweighs because that small merchant could turn into one of your most profitable clients very quickly overnight. And so, the sales talent at all three levels really has to maintain what you're bringing to the table. Because as somebody moves through that stratification, a 10 location can turn into a 400 location franchise overnight.
Quickly.
And all of a sudden, it makes a big difference. So you definitely get an advantage to it. But on the con side, you have to treat every customer as if they're going to grow into that most profitable customer. Yeah. So
in your business, have you experimented with stratification? Do you use it now?
Yeah, it's actually one of the 7. It's what we've done least, but we have the buyer centric. But we really did look at particularly in the micro segment, because we did find that we really couldn't address the needs of that market as well as we could when we had a specific inside team. It took us a while to get there, and that's really where we started saying this group needs to focus on that particular segment, and we've had a little bit more success in that. But I will tell you, it's not been the dominant model at Heartland.
Okay, great. All right, so that's that one. Okay, so let's move on to the second one. And this is called the hunter-farmer model, which this has been around for a long time. And basically what this means is that you have 2 distinct sales organizations. You have one group called hunters, and all they do is open up new business.
Right.
You have another group called farmers, and all they do is grow existing accounts. Okay, pretty straightforward. It's been around for a long time. Let's just talk about a quick pros and cons of this one. So the pros are great role clarity.
Right.
Everybody knows what they're supposed to do when they show up for work on Monday morning. The next is that typically the results are improved by focusing on the critical activities. So if I'm a hunter rep and all my job, my value to the organization is opening up new accounts, and through that focus, I get really good at it. Same thing on the farmer side. So those are the pros. The negatives is that sales expenses can go up quite a bit. In some cases, they can double. Because if you have 2 sales forces, you also need 2 chains of command, in the sales management ranks, first line, second line, third line, et cetera. So it can get expensive. And then lastly, the customer can get confused.
Right, absolutely. Right? That's the big deal.
So I'm your rep. We work together, you become a client, and then I hand you off to this other person, right? That can be confusing. So what's your opinion of the hunter-farmer model?
Yeah, so we actually did this toward the end of 08, really 04 to 08, we really focused on this model. And what broke down was that customer experience. And I would even say the customer intimacy broke down. And when that becomes one of your corporate strategies, all of a sudden you have this kind of segregation. Instead of going deep into a customer relationship, you have that expertise and that specialist that can come in and grow the relationship, can provide a level of service, can introduce new products. But interestingly, we didn't see a huge spike in it. And I do understand the concept that can work in a lot of different industries. It didn't necessarily work in ours. But the idea of that farmer really going in depth, again, as a sales leader, oftentimes that particular channel doesn't get nurtured as much, but they need to be as strong as the hunter channel and really drive that in-depth relationship. So we did have 2 different organizations. Actually, in 2012, when I took over my current position, that was one we shut down for just that reason. It just didn't make as much sense with our market strategy, and particularly with our buyers. It added too much complexity and confusion to them when we could really carry the ball with the one primary salesperson.
One thing I love about your company is you guys have tried everything.
Yeah.
So you have great experience.
It's good and bad, right?
No, I think it's great. I mean, you tried it.
Yeah.
It wasn't great for you. Your customers didn't respond well to it, so you moved on to the next thing, right?
And the customers might have responded well, but to your point earlier about expense, too, it wasn't sustainable going forward. And we didn't see enough of a lift out of that investment to really say, this is the one we're going to go forward with. It's an interesting one.
Okay, great. Do you read the SBI magazine?
I do. I get it.
Great. That's fantastic. And the reason why I'm asking you that question is that we just came out with our new magazine. And I wanted to bring the audience's attention to this magazine because if you are enjoying this show, I think you're going to enjoy the magazine. So I would encourage you to subscribe to the SBI magazine. In it are articles about people like Tony discussing strategic issues like this one. You can get a free subscription by going to salesbenchmarkindex.com/the SBI magazine. We need to take a short break, but after the break, I'm going to ask Tony his opinions on the next 2 organizational models, the geographic model and the vertical industry model. So come right back.
Your finish line is your number, and the only way to reach it is to make certain everyone is pulling their weight and headed in the same direction. That's why SBI uses proven techniques to bring everyone on your team on board with successful, standardized sales programs, enabling victory at the turn of every quarter.
Welcome back. My name is Greg Alexander, and I am the CEO of SBI, and you are watching SBI TV. I am joined today by Tony Capucille. Before the break, Tony and I were discussing the pros and cons of the 7 dominant organizational models in B2B sales today. During this segment, I would like to turn our attention to 2 additional models, the geographic model and the vertical industry model. So let's start with the geographic model. I think everyone knows what this is, but if not, it is simply assigning a sales resource to a geographic region and having them sell all things to all people. So I understand that you use the geographic model.
It's been our dominant one.
Okay.
That's correct.
So let's just quickly discuss the pros and cons on this and get your opinion on these, okay? So the pros it's a low sales cost model because you have an efficient geographically deployed organization. Also, a plus is lots of customer contact. So like in your case with client intimacy being your strategy, that's a good thing, deep relationships, okay? The negatives is that sometimes smaller accounts can consume lots of sales resources. Also, industry knowledge can suffer because you're going horizontal, not industry vertical. And then lastly, each geographic region requires dedicated resources, so there's no ability to pool resources.
Right.
So what's your opinion on the...
Yeah, we obviously love that model, and that's what we've gone after. I kind of go to the cons of it, just always trying to improve. But the fact of the matter is, a couple of the cons you mentioned, we always want to tend towards that verticalization because we lose that. You don't have that specialist in the area that can provide an even maybe more client intimate environment. But you have to wait till your product suite, I think, is large enough to be able to actually go into the verticals, and your saturation points also have to get to a point where you almost can demand that maturity. I think it's a step in maturity. And the other side of it is you do find your sales organization using a lot of their energies on those small accounts. Yeah. And that's a big deal because you're always trying to focus on profitability and making sure they're in the right doors. But whenever you're putting them in a geographical area, every customer matters. And I know I was talking earlier about that. Any customer could turn into your most profitable, but at the same point, a lot of them aren't. And so trying to figure out how to deploy each individual salesperson so they have the mindset to kind of overcome that con, if you will, is a big issue. But yeah, overall, it gives us a lot of advantage to go to market. So the pluses outweigh the negatives in your case? For us, they do. Our primary sales channel, that's a little under 1,000 of our 1,300, is deployed in that particular fashion. Yeah, interesting. Okay. All right, let's move on to the next model, which is the 4th one out of the 7, and this is the vertical industry model. It's ironic we're talking about this one right after geography, right? Good. It's the other end of the spectrum. So just quickly, the pros and cons here. So the pros are domain knowledge of the industry drives a consultative sales approach. Makes sense. Deep relationships are established because I know your industry, and that allows me to have common things to talk to you about. Referrals tend to spike because most industries are very tight-knit groups, and if you and I are in the same industry, we probably know some of the same people, and referrals can go up. So these are the pluses, okay? The cons of the vertical industry are it's expensive. You know, you need multiple sales forces. There's about 10 dominant macro vertical industries, so if you went across all of them, you might have 10 sales forces, right? Multiple people can call on the same account. You know, for a business that might be in multiple vertical industries, I mean, how do you handle something like GE, right, as an example? And adjacent industries can get ignored. So if you decide not to go after all industries, you're basically walking away from some business. So in your opinion, as a organizational design principle, what do you think of the vertical industry? I mean, I love this approach. And I do think it does come as an opportunity cost. You're saying it's a con that adjacent industries can get ignored. I think until you can cover that, sometimes that's a good way to go about it, because you're focusing and making sure you're actually getting a profit from the right segment versus doing everything and therefore doing nothing, right? Overall, the vertical is a step in maturation. I kind of referred to it earlier with the geographical approach. Once you get enough market saturation, and once you can more or less afford to do this, take the principles you've had from your sales organization and then deploy it more vertically. We actually did this for a very brief time, but we kind of went all in on verticalization, and it was interesting. I don't think we were quite ready for it. I love the pros to be able to walk in and have a full suite of products. You are that specialist. You can talk about that particular industry and really win the client in a stronger way. But I just think it's more of a once you hit a certain market saturation point, once your product suite is developed enough, and then I think it becomes incredibly intriguing.
Mm-hmm. So the two things that you mentioned there that I thought were interesting. So you talk about it being on your kind of maturity scale.
Yeah.
And the way that you're measuring maturity, I just want to make sure I get this for the audience, is product suite, so how wide and how vertically relevant your products are.
Yes.
Right. And then the second one is...
well, more or less, I would say my second one was market share. And,
that's right.
And so if I'm starting up a new company, I actually might say, no, let's go the verticalization route. But let's be targeted, and let's not worry about that adjacent market that we're going to miss. Yeah. And we have to be okay with that, right? But in our situation, when we have just an incredibly large customer market opportunity, I can gain a lot right now going to market in more of the geographical approach. But once I hit a certain point, we're going to stand up new channels. And to your point, it is going to cost us. But once, restaurant's a great one for us. We will eventually have a restaurant specialist because of what we're doing, what we're innovating in that particular area. So when I'm saying it for our organization, it might be different than maybe a new startup or a younger company that says, no, we want to dominate the healthcare industry. Let's be vertical specialists.
Yeah, very good. Tony, do you have one of these?
Yeah, of course.
Right. It doesn't leave your side, right?
That's right.
Right. Do you have a commute or do you travel?
I actually don't, but
you're lucky.
Yeah.
Do you exercise?
I exercise.
Right. So the reason why I'm bringing this up is that we publish a weekly podcast. It's basically an interview like this one, but it's audio instead of video. And what I found is that our audience is really enjoying the podcast because when they're commuting, when they're working out, when they're traveling, they can turn this non-productive time into productive time by listening to the podcast. So I wanted to draw everyone's attention to that and have them consider the podcast. So if our viewers that are watching this show want to listen to our podcast, go to salesbenchmarkindex.com/SBI podcast and subscribe. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about the final three organizational models: the product overlay model, the buyer role model, which is a new one, and then the dreaded hybrid model. So stick around and come right back.
This is not a table. It is a stage where your performance is measured in numbers. If you reach them, you get an encore. If you don't, it could be curtains. That's why you need the well-rehearsed, proven sales and marketing strategies of SBI.
Welcome back, everyone. I am Greg Alexander, CEO of SBI, and you are watching SBI TV. Today, my guest is Tony Capucille, the Chief Sales Officer at Heartland Payment Systems. Before the break, I made you a promise, and that promise was we would discuss the remaining organizational models, which are known as the product overlay model, the buyer role model, and the hybrid model. So let's get to it. So Tony, the fifth of the 7 models is the product overlay model. And this is described simply as a sales team dedicated to each product line.
Right.
So quick review of the pros and cons of this. Okay, so the pros are clear accountability for each product's revenue.
Right.
Okay. Faster sales cycles due to a self-sufficient sales force because they really know the product. And tight alignment between the product teams and the sales teams. So those are the pluses.
Yeah, okay? Absolutely.
The negatives are the sales teams can get costly, especially when a product reaches maturation. Geographic dispersion can reduce customer contact and customer intimacy. And then the cross-sell oftentimes suffers because we have product silos set up. So if I'm a salesperson responsible for product A, I might not be focused on cross-selling product B.
Sure.
So what's your opinion of the product overlay organizational model?
So this is something that I completely agree with the pros. It's a really strong model because of that accountability. I think accountability to the product groups, a tight relationship there, understanding what the market needs, really does trump, and you get that fast sales cycle. And we've seen this in some of our key products when we've spun them off recently in 2013. We stood up a completely new product-specific channel that was this product overlay model, and it's taken off compared to where it had been the decade before. And so we've definitely seen the fruit of this particular approach. To your point, I think that if you have the silos starting to develop, I think that really falls on the shoulders of the sales leadership. Because, yeah, it's going to show up if you don't ensure that you're getting them to work in synergy across product channels. And I think that's one of the big errors in this model that can really be overcome because you can create channels that are stronger together, right? And so if you let them silo up and do their thing and not worry about and think about or provide the synergies across channel, you're creating more trouble than I think you're getting in the benefit. But again, I think that's something that sales leadership should focus on and say, if we're going to do this, and spin up different product channels, let's figure out how to make sure we win together.
So you just did it back basically in 2013, and you've had great success. Did you do it for one product, or have you now expanded beyond that?
So we did it with one product, with our payroll spa model, which is functionally saying we're going after payroll. And we've now stood up for billing, our billing products. And we're going to be doing it with other products in the future. Heartland Commerce obviously had some acquisitions that have led us down the road of saying, do we want everyone to sell POS, or do we want to focus on particular channels? And so I think that's a recipe. And again, as the sales leader and my leadership team, we're seeing that this is very scalable going forward, but getting them to interwork together with a theme of stronger together. And I think that's where, I've learned from a lot of predecessors or my peers, in conversations with groups like yours, asking, what did you guys do wrong when you stood up these multiple product channels? And really the biggest sin, if you will, is not getting them to work together and then getting VP clashes or SVP clashes, and that doesn't help.
Yeah, okay, very good. So that's the product overlay model. Let's now move to the sixth model, which is a relatively new one. It's called the buyer role model. Okay, and this is where sales resources are assigned to a specific buyer type. So for example, you and I might work for the same company, and I sell to the CFO. You sell to the CIO.
Right.
And Bob over there sells to, the head of operations. Okay. It's new, but it seems to be getting a lot of traction right now because we're in this world of hyper specialization. So let's do a quick pros and cons analysis of this. So the first is that if I'm dedicated to a buyer as a salesperson, I'm really going to have a deep understanding of their needs, and I'll be able to relate better to the buyer. My reference network is going to go up exponentially because in this use case I call on CFOs. I'm going to know a lot of CFOs, so my ability to generate referrals goes up. And also it provides the product team an early warning system for changes in buyer behavior.
Right.
I can go back to the product team and say, hey, the CFO, again in this case, is now having this problem. Can we develop something to solve that? Okay, so those are the pros. The negatives is you're going to have multiple people calling on the same account, which can result in account ownership, turf wars, and things of that nature. It's very expensive, and it's really difficult to deploy globally.
Right.
How do you do this across the universe? So I don't think you guys have experimented with this yet.
This is the one we haven't.
Right.
Yeah.
But just theoretically speaking, how do you react to it?
So I love the concept. When you can understand a buyer persona, you guys do a lot of good work in that area, and get really specific and targeted, it's very intriguing, right? It is a very academic approach from my perspective, and I think that you're going to see some good companies. I think you and I were talking in the service industry that they can start deploying this effectively. I think they're going to be a little more cutting edge on how this comes together. There are a lot of conflicts that, like you said, multiple people calling on the same customer. Working those things out as a sales leader would be something I'd be really intrigued to work out that puzzle. And I guess it really does just depend on what type of market you're going after, the sales cycle, the complexity. But it's interesting that intimacy you can gain with that buyer persona. And I think that if you have the right product suite, it's intriguing.
Well, keep that one on your radar screen.
I will. I got a lot of them working though right now, so I'll keep it there though.
Yeah. All right, let's go to the seventh and final organizational model, okay? So this is the hybrid approach. And this means just simply combining two or more of these approaches into a go-to-market. So the pros on this is that executive teams who can't make the tough call on picking one and being really good at it can deploy this to please everybody.
Right.
The cons is it usually doesn't work. Yeah. I mean, our benchmarking database, when we've looked at this a ton of times, would tell you that organizations that deploy a hybrid model underperform those that have a purebred model. Do you deploy a hybrid model, and do you agree or disagree with its effectiveness?
Yeah, so I understand that a pure model might work most effectively, yep. Right? I think that there's a reality of a lot of us that are actually deploying models, figuring out, shifting from one to the other. I would say there's a predominant model that we've used over time. We do have hybrid. Like our national team is going to be different than our payroll or product particular channel. So I guess to your point, it usually can't maybe optimized, but we have been guilty of pulling different models together. To your point, I think the more we can focus on who we are and understand that clear identity and what we're trying to accomplish, you're going to be better at achieving those goals. But I think a lot of us out here in the less academic world, like say, okay, how do you move from point to point? What should we do? Do you shift strategy and shut something off, or do you let things coexist while you're working things out? Yeah. And I think that's more or less where we are. We've gotten results. Again, could we optimize them more if we said, no, this is it, and we know it? Sure, but I just think that's less of a reality for us and maybe others.
I mean, you're a multi-billion-dollar company. You have thousands of employees, right? So I think as your organization scales, okay, it becomes more difficult to be single model, and it becomes more appropriate when you address a larger swath of the market. When you have a broader product line, it becomes more beneficial to be hybrid. One thing that you've done, which I appreciate, is you are hybrid, but you're not. And what I mean by that is that within a channel, you might have multiple channels, national, small, et cetera, but within that channel, you're purebred in that channel.
Yeah,
is that true?
I think that's a really big distinction. Within channels, we now start to understand our identity. We know what we're trying to accomplish. And when you acquire a new company, we go through a lot of acquisitions, understand what they're trying to accomplish and figure out what they're going to be. And so that is something that we do, but we have, again, different channels within. Yeah.
Well, listen, we're at our time window. I opened by introducing you by saying that you were a unique guest. And I will tell you that you have lived up to the billing.
I don't know about that.
No, you really have. I mean, your perspective on this complicated topic, which is organizational design, is very complicated, and your perspective is well beyond your years. So on behalf of all of our viewers, you've made a large contribution to our field today, so I wanted to personally thank you for that.
Enjoyed being here with you, Ray. Thank you very much.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, there you have it. A pros and cons review of the 7 dominant sales organizational models by the youngest chief sales officer in the Fortune 1000. I hope you enjoyed it. I would also like to thank you, our viewers, for tuning in. If you enjoyed this show, I suggest you subscribe to SBI TV at salesbenchmarkindex.com/TV, or you can find us at our SBI YouTube channel. We have some outstanding guests confirmed for future episodes that you will not want to miss. Until then, I wish you the best of luck as you try and make your number.